rope burns on their wrists, told Jake Morrison everything he needed to know about how long the 5 Apache women had been hanging from that old cottonwood tree. Their feet barely touched the ground, and their voices had grown hoarser from calling for help that hadn't come until now. What Jake didn't know was that saving them would cost him more than just the bullets in his gun. It would cost him everything he thought he knew about justice, family, and the price of keeping promises in the unforgiving desert. "Please," the oldest one whispered as Jake approached with his knife drawn. "Save us, B." But as Jake cut the first rope, he had no idea that those 2 words would change his life forever. If you're joining us on this desert adventure from anywhere around the world, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. We love connecting with fellow Western story enthusiasts across the globe. I had been tracking the Garrison gang for 3 weeks when I heard the voices calling through the desert wind. At first I thought it was just the sound that rocks and sand make when the temperature changes. But as I guided my horse closer to the grove of cottonwood trees near the dry creek bed, the voices became clearer. "Help us," one called out in English, though accented with Apache inflection. "Please, someone help us." What I found made my blood run cold. 5 Apache women, all young and beautiful, hanging by their wrists from the largest tree in the grove. Their feet could barely touch the ground, and their traditional dresses were torn and dusty from struggling against their bonds. The oldest, who couldn't have been more than 25, looked at me with dark eyes that held both desperation and surprising strength. "You came," she said simply. "Who did this to you?" I asked, pulling my knife from my belt and approaching the nearest rope. "Bad men," another one replied. "They said we had something they wanted. When we refused to tell them where it was, they left us here to die." I cut the first rope, catching the youngest girl as she collapsed. She was lighter than I'd expected, but her grip was strong as she steadied herself against me. "Water," she whispered. I helped her to my horse and gave her my canteen while I moved to cut down the others. Each one thanked me in Apache, then in English, their voices gaining strength as circulation returned to their arms. The oldest woman, who seemed to be their leader, waited until all 5 were free before speaking again. "My name is Ayana," she said, rubbing her wrists where the rope had cut into her skin. "These are my sisters, Kasanale, Naley, and Sitlai." "Jake Morrison," I replied, studying their faces. Despite their ordeal, they were remarkably composed. "How long were you hanging there?" "Since dawn," Kasana replied. "The men said they would return when the sun set if we changed our minds about cooperating." I looked at the position of the sun. "We had maybe 2 hours before the gang returned if they kept their word." "I can get you to safety," I said. "There's a mission about 10 miles south where the sisters will take care of you." Ayana shook her head. "No, we cannot go to safety while these men are still hunting us. They will never stop." "Then what do you want to do?" She looked at each of her sisters in turn, and I saw a silent communication pass between them. When she turned back to me, there was steel in her voice. "We want you to help us hunt them down." I stared at her. "You want to go after the men who did this to you?" "Yes," it said, the fire of revenge burning in her dark eyes. "They killed our family. They burned our village. They took everything from us except our lives. And now," Naley added quietly, "they want to take those, too." I had come to this part of Arizona territory to bring the Garrison gang to justice for robbery and murder. But looking at these 5 women, seeing the determination in their faces despite what they'd endured, I realized that my mission had just become far more complicated. "I'm hunting dangerous men," I warned them. "Men who won't hesitate to kill you if they get another chance." Ayana stepped closer to me, and I was struck by her height and the grace with which she moved despite her ordeal. "Mr. Morrison," she said, "we are not helpless victims. We are Apache women. We know how to fight, how to track, how to survive in this desert. What we need is someone with the authority to make their deaths legal." I understood. As a deputy U.S. Marshal, I could make arrests. I could ensure that whatever happened to the gang would be seen as legitimate law enforcement rather than vigilante justice. "There's something else," Sitlai said quietly. Something you need to know about why they wanted us alive. What's that? Ayana exchanged glances with her sisters again. We know where something is hidden. Something valuable enough that men will kill entire families to find it. The sun was getting lower, and I knew we needed to move soon if we were going to avoid another confrontation at the tree. All right, I said, making a decision that I knew would change everything. But if we're doing this together, we do it my way, legal, and by the book. Agreed, Ayana said immediately. As we mounted our horses, the sisters riding double since the gang had taken their mounts, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was much more to the story than a simple robbery gone wrong. Mr. Morrison, Ayana called as we rode away from the grove. There is one more thing you should know about the price of helping us. What's that? As she was quiet for so long that I thought she might not answer. Finally, she spoke. Once you know what we know, you can never go back to your old life. The knowledge we carry will make you a target for as long as you live. I looked at her riding behind me, at the strength and beauty that hadn't been broken by torture and abandonment, and realized that maybe I didn't want to go back to my old life anyway. We rode hard toward the Badlands, following tracks that were easy enough to read in the soft sand near the creek bed. The Garrison gang wasn't trying to hide their trail, which meant they were either supremely confident or supremely stupid. In my experience, both could be equally dangerous. They're heading for Devil's Canyon, Kachina observed, studying the horizon ahead of us. There are caves there where they can make a stand. You know this country well, I said. Better than they do, Ayana replied. Our people have lived here for generations. Every rock, every hidden spring, every safe path through the mountains, we know them all. As the sun began to set, painting the desert in shades of red and gold, Idle suddenly raised her hand for us to stop. Listen, she whispered. In the distance, I could hear the sound of horses and men's voices. The gang was making camp somewhere ahead of us, probably feeling secure enough to build a fire and cook a meal. How many men are we talking about? I asked. 6 when they took us, Nelly replied. But there may be more now. They sent riders in different directions before they left us at the tree. 6 men, possibly more, against 1 marshal and 5 women who had been tortured and left to die. The odds weren't good, but I'd faced worse. We need to know their exact position before we make any move, I said. And we need to know what we're really dealing with. Sitlai dismounted and pressed her ear to the ground in the old Apache way. After a moment, she looked up. 8 horses, she reported, maybe 2 miles ahead in the canyon mouth. They're not moving. Ayana, I said, it's time you told me the truth about what they're after. If I'm going to risk all our lives, I need to know what we're fighting for. She was quiet for a long moment, looking at each of her sisters before turning back to me. Our father was a chief, she began. But he was also something else. Something that made him valuable to white men and dangerous to his enemies. What kind of something? He knew the location of the hidden places, Kasana said quietly. The sacred places where our ancestors left things. I was getting tired of riddles. What kind of things? Gold, Idle said bluntly. More gold than you've ever seen. Enough to buy an army. My heart sank. Gold made men crazy. And crazy men did things that kept marshals like me busy. Where is it? That's what they want to know, Ayana said. That's what they tortured our family to learn. That's why they left us alive. They think we know the location. Do you? Another long silence. Finally, Nelly spoke up. Yes, she said simply. We know. The implications hit me like a physical blow. If these women really knew the location of a major gold strike, then the Garrison gang wasn't just a group of petty criminals. They were the advanced scouts for something much bigger and much more dangerous. Who else knows that you know? I asked. That's the problem, Ayana said. We're not sure. Word travels fast in Apache country, and there are people on both sides who would kill to get their hands on that information. As if summoned by her words, the sound of additional horses reached us from behind. Someone else was following our trail, and they were coming fast. Friends of yours? I asked. Kasana was already checking the loads in the rifle she'd taken from my saddle. No, she said grimly. Those are white men's horses, and they're in a hurry. I counted the dust clouds on our back trail. At least 4 riders, maybe more. We are caught between 2 groups. I realized the gang ahead of us and whoever's behind us. Welcome to our world, Marshal Morrison, Ayanna said with bitter humor. This is what it's like to be hunted by everyone you meet. The sun was almost down now, and in the growing darkness, I had to make a choice that could get us all killed. We go forward, I decided. Better to face known enemies than unknown ones. But as we spurred our horses toward Devil's Canyon, Ayanna called out one more warning. Marshal, there's something else you need to know about the gold. What now? Her voice was barely audible above the sound of hooves and wind. It's cursed. Every white man who's ever tried to take it has died violently. Our father believed that's why the ancestors hid it in the first place. Great. Gold, gangs, curses, and now we were riding into a canyon with enemies ahead and behind. Just another day in the life of a territorial marshal. Me, Devil's Canyon earned its name honestly. The walls rose straight up from the desert floor like the ribs of some massive skeleton, and the narrow entrance was barely wide enough for 2 horses to ride abreast. Worse, there was no way out except the way we came in, which meant that if we were wrong about the gang's position, we'd be trapped with nowhere to run. They're just ahead, Sidley whispered, pointing to a thin line of smoke rising from deeper in the canyon. Maybe a quarter mile. I dismounted and checked my weapons one more time. 6 shots in my Colt, 15 rounds for the Winchester, and a backup Derringer in my boot. Not much against 8 men, but it would have to do. What's the plan? Ayanna asked, sliding down from her horse with the fluid grace that all the sisters seemed to share. You 5 stay here with the horses, I said. I'll go in alone, and no. The word came from all 5 women simultaneously, spoken with such force that my horse actually shied away. This is not your fight alone, Kasana said firmly. These men killed our family. Apache law demands that we be the ones to balance the scales. Apache law doesn't carry weight in a federal courtroom, I pointed out. We're not in a courtroom, Ilil replied, her dark eyes flashing with anger. We're in Apache territory, hunting Apache killers with Apache weapons. I looked at the rifle in her hands and realized it wasn't one of mine. None of the weapons the sisters were carrying had come from my saddle. Where did you get those guns? Nellie smiled for the first time since I'd cut her down from the tree. You think we hung there helplessly for hours without planning our revenge? We hid weapons all over this desert, Marshal. This is our land. Before I could respond, the sound of horses echoing off the canyon walls announced that our pursuers had caught up with us. We were officially caught in the middle. Change of plan, I said quickly. We go in fast and hard. Take the gang by surprise before the others reach us. Now you're thinking like an Apache, Ayanna said approvingly. We moved through the canyon on foot, leaving the horses hidden behind a rockfall near the entrance. The sisters moved like ghosts, their moccasin feet making no sound on the rocky ground, while my boots seemed to announce our presence with every step. The gang's campfire came into view around a bend in the canyon wall. 8 men, just as Kit Lally had predicted, sitting around the flames and passing a bottle of whiskey. Their horses were picketed nearby, and their weapons were stacked carelessly against a boulder. Overconfident, I murmured to Ayanna. Good, she whispered back. Confidence makes men careless. I was about to signal for us to spread out when I heard something that made my blood freeze. One of the men around the fire was talking, and his words carried clearly in the still canyon air. Those Apache __ will talk eventually, he was saying. And when they do, we'll have enough gold to buy our own territory. What if they don't? Another voice asked. Then we'll start cutting off fingers until they change their minds. That usually works. Beside me, I felt rather than saw Ayanna's entire body go rigid with rage. When I looked at her face in the dim firelight, I saw something that reminded me why Apache warriors had been feared throughout the Southwest for centuries. Marshal, she said quietly, I need you to understand something. What you're about to see. This is not justice. This is vengeance. And there's a difference. And before I could ask what she meant, she gave a signal I didn't recognize, and her 4 sisters melted away into the shadows like smoke. Wait, I hissed, but she was already moving toward the camp with the patience and purpose of a hunting cat. The first man died without ever knowing he was under attack. A knife appeared in his back as if by magic, and he pitched forward into the fire without making a sound. The second and third men died almost simultaneously, taken down by Cassina and Sil from opposite sides of the camp. The remaining 5 gang members scrambled for their weapons, but they were too late and too drunk. Nelly and Sidlally emerged from behind the horses, cutting off their escape route, while Iona stepped into the firelight like an avenging spirit. You remember us, she said conversationally. The 5 Apache women you left to die. The gang leader, a scarred man with missing teeth, grabbed for his gun, but found himself staring down the barrel of my Winchester instead. I wouldn't, I advised him. U.S. Marshal, you're all under arrest for kidnapping, torture, and murder. Marshal, one of the other men said desperately. You don't understand. These women are dangerous. They know where Iona's knife found his throat before he could finish the sentence. No, she said calmly. We are dangerous. There's a difference. In the space of less than 2 minutes, 8 armed men had been reduced to 2 survivors, and those 2 were looking at the Apache sisters with the kind of terror usually reserved for natural disasters. Please, the gang leader whispered, we were just following orders. We weren't supposed to hurt anyone. Whose orders? I demanded. Sheriff Patterson, he said quickly. He's the one who wanted the gold. We were just. Iona's second knife took him in the chest, ending his confession permanently. I stared at her. That was evidence. That was justice, she corrected. And now you know why helping us comes with a price, Marshal Morrison. Behind us, the sound of approaching horses grew louder. Our pursuers would be here within minutes, and we were about to learn whether they were friends or enemies. Sheriff Patterson, I said, processing what the dying man had revealed. That explains how they knew where to find you. And it explains why we can never be safe, Cassina added, wiping blood from her knife. Not while he's alive. Duh. The sound of hooves on rock echoed through the canyon, and Chitlali held up 4 fingers, then pointed toward the entrance. 4 riders coming fast. Time to find out whose side they're on, I said, checking my weapons again. But Iona was looking at her sisters with an expression I couldn't read. There's something else we need to tell you, Marshal, she said. About Sheriff Patterson. About why he wants the gold so badly. What now? Her voice was barely audible above the approaching hooves. He's our uncle. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. These 5 women had been betrayed, tortured, and left to die by their own blood relative. In my years as a marshal, I'd seen men do terrible things for money, but family betrayal always cut deepest. Your uncle, I repeated, making sure I'd heard correctly. Our father's brother, Cassina confirmed, her voice bitter with old pain. He was supposed to protect us after father died. Instead, he saw an opportunity to get rich. The sound of horses grew closer, and I realized we needed to move. The canyon was about to become a killing ground, and we were outnumbered and outgunned. We need to get out of here, I said. But Nail was shaking her head. No more running, she said firmly. If Patterson is out there, this ends tonight. 5 women and 1 marshal against a corrupt sheriff and however many men he's brought, I asked. That's not courage, that's suicide. Iona stepped closer to me, and in the firelight, I could see something in her eyes that made my chest tighten. Not just determination, but something softer, more personal. Marshal Morrison, she said quietly. What would you risk to protect the people you care about? The question was loaded with meaning that went beyond our current situation. I found myself looking at her face, at the strength and beauty that had somehow survived torture and abandonment, and realizing that my feelings for this remarkable woman had grown far beyond professional duty. Everything, I admitted. Then you understand why we can't run, she said simply. The riders appeared at the canyon mouth, silhouetted against the starlit sky. 4 men on horseback moving with the careful precision of experienced lawmen or experienced killers. Sheriff Patterson, I called out, deciding to take the initiative. This is Deputy U.S. Marshal Morrison. I have prisoners for transport. The horses stopped, and after a moment, a familiar voice echoed off the canyon walls. Jake Morrison, Sheriff Patterson called back. Should have known you'd turn up in the middle of this mess. I knew Patterson by reputation, a political appointee who'd gotten his badge through connections rather than competence. But I'd never suspected him of being involved with gang activity. Send your men down, I ordered. We need to discuss jurisdiction. Patterson's laugh was harsh. I don't think so, Marshal. You see, you've stumbled into something that goes way beyond your authority. Murder and kidnapping are federal crimes, Sheriff. Not when it's Apache killers getting what they deserve, he replied. Those women are wanted for the massacre of a white family. I'm here to bring them to justice. Beside me, Elle made a sound of pure rage. Liar, she hissed. He's the one who killed the Hendersons to make it look like we did it. The pieces of the puzzle were finally falling into place. Patterson hadn't just betrayed his nieces for gold. He'd framed them for murder to cover his tracks. That's a serious accusation, Sheriff, I called out. From an Apache savage, Patterson replied. Against a duly laid peace officer. Who do you think a judge will believe? He had a point. In territorial courts, Apache testimony was rarely given the same weight as white testimony, even when the Apache were telling the truth. What do you want, Patterson? Simple, he said. Hand over the women and you can ride out of here. Try to protect them and you'll die with them. Ayanna moved so close to me that I could feel her breath on my neck. There's something else, she whispered. About the gold, about why it's so important to him. What? It's not just gold, Marshal. It's the location of the largest silver deposit in the territory. Whoever controls it controls the future of Arizona. My mind raced. A silver strike that large would be worth millions, enough to buy political influence throughout the Southwest. No wonder Patterson was willing to commit murder to get his hands on it. And only you 5 know where it is. Only us, she confirmed. And once he has that information, she didn't need to finish. Once Patterson had what he wanted, the sisters would become liabilities that needed to be eliminated. Marshal Morrison. Patterson's voice echoed through the canyon again. I'm losing patience. Send them out or we're coming in. I looked at Ayanna at the trust and something deeper I saw in her dark eyes and made a decision that would change both our lives forever. No, I called back. These women are under federal protection. If you want them, you'll have to go through me. The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Finally, Patterson spoke again, and all pretense of law and order was gone from his voice. So be it, Marshal. Boys, kill them all. The canyon exploded into gunfire as Patterson's men spurred their horses forward. But as bullets began ricocheting off the rock walls around us, Ayanna grabbed my arm with surprising strength. Follow me, she said urgently. There's something you need to see before we die. Without waiting for an answer, she led me deeper into the canyon toward a narrow crack in the rock wall that I hadn't noticed before. What are you doing for showing you the real price of helping us? She replied, pulling me through the crack into a hidden cave. What I saw in that cave, illuminated by Ayanna's hastily lit torch, took my breath away and changed everything I thought I knew about gold, greed, and the true value of what the sisters had been protecting. A dam as the cave stretched back farther than my torch could illuminate. But what I could see made my knees weak. Gold, silver, precious stones, not just nuggets or raw ore, but work pieces, jewelry, ceremonial objects, decorative weapons that must have taken Apache craftsmen generations to create. My God, I whispered. Not God, Iona corrected softly. Ancestors, this is where our people hid their most precious treasures when the white soldiers came. Not just valuable metals, but the history of our nation. I moved deeper into the cave, amazed by the craftsmanship of the pieces scattered throughout. This wasn't just a gold mine. It was a museum, a treasury, a sacred trust that had been preserved for generations. This is what Patterson wants. This is what Patterson knows about, Kasina said, appearing behind us with her sisters. But it's not what we've been protecting. Outside, gunfire continued to echo through the canyon, but the sound seemed distant and unimportant compared to what I was seeing. I don't understand. Nellie stepped forward, carrying something wrapped in deer skin. The gold is valuable, Marshall, but it's not the real treasure. She unwrapped the bundle, revealing a set of maps drawn on treated animal hide. Even by torchlight, I could see they were incredibly detailed, showing mountain ranges, water sources, and mineral deposits throughout the Southwest. These maps show every source of precious metals in Apache territory, explained. But more importantly, they show something else. What? Kittley pointed to symbols scattered throughout the maps, small marks that looked like stylized birds or clouds. Water, she said simply. Underground rivers, hidden springs, sources of fresh water in places where white men think there is none. The implications hit me like a thunderbolt. In the desert Southwest, water was more valuable than gold. Control of water sources meant control of land, of cattle, of entire territories. These maps could make someone the most powerful person in Arizona, I realized. Or New Mexico, Iona added. Or Colorado. The underground rivers connect across hundreds of miles. That's why Patterson is willing to kill for this. I said, it's not just about the gold. It's about the future of the West. Kasina confirmed. Whoever has these maps can control where towns are built, where railroads run, where cattle can graze. The gunfire outside was getting closer, and I knew we were running out of time. Why are you showing me this? I asked. Iona stepped closer. So close that I could see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes. Because if we don't survive tonight, someone needs to know the truth. Someone needs to make sure these maps don't fall into the wrong hands. And because, Nyla added with a slight smile, our sister cares about you more than she's willing to admit, even in our desperate situation. Iona blushed. This is not the time, she protested. This is exactly the time, Ital said firmly. If we're going to die, we should die with no secrets between us. I looked at this remarkable woman who had survived torture, abandonment, and betrayal without losing her strength or her compassion, and realized that my feelings for her had grown far beyond admiration. Iona, I said, when this is over, if this is over, she corrected. When this is over, I insisted, I want to talk about what happens next, about us. She smiled, and for a moment, the cave felt warm despite the desert cold. I would like that, she said simply. The sound of boots on stone announced that Patterson's men had reached the main cave. We had minutes, maybe less, before they found our hiding place. So, what's the plan? I asked. Kasina was already moving toward a second passage that led deeper into the mountain. There's another way out, she said. But it's dangerous. More dangerous than facing 4 armed men in a deadened cave. Much more dangerous, Sitlai said seriously. The passage leads through the sacred burial grounds. Our ancestors' spirits guard those tunnels. I looked at her to see if she was serious. She was. Spirits I can deal with, I said. It's the living that worry me. But as we gathered the maps and prepared to venture deeper into the mountain, Iona caught my arm. Marshall, she said quietly. There's one more thing you need to know about the price of helping us. My heart sank. After everything I'd learned, what could possibly be worse? What now? Her voice was barely a whisper. If Patterson dies tonight, his death will start a war between the Apache and the territorial government. Blood will flow for years. And if he doesn't die, then he'll keep hunting us until we're all dead. And the maps will fall into the hands of men who will use them to steal the last of our people's land. I understood. There was no good choice, no clean solution. Whatever happened tonight would have consequences that reached far beyond the five of us. Then we'd better make sure we choose the right path, I said, checking my weapons one final time. Behind us, Patterson's voice echoed through the caves. I know you're in there. There's no way out except through me. Ayanna smiled grimly. He's wrong about that, she said. There's always another way. The question is whether we're brave enough to take it. Dealey, the burial passage was everything Sitlai had promised and worse. The walls were lined with skeletal remains wrapped in rotting cloth, and the air was thick with the smell of decay and something else, something that made the hair on my arm stand up. Whether it was spirits or just the natural eeriness of being surrounded by the dead, I couldn't tell. Stay close, Ayanna whispered, leading our group with a torch held high. The ancestors don't like strangers, but they'll tolerate you if you're with us. How comforting, I muttered, trying not to look too closely at the eye sockets that seemed to follow our movement through the tunnel. Behind us, we could hear Patterson and his men searching the treasure cave, their voices echoing off the stone walls as they discovered the wealth that had been hidden there for generations. Jesus Christ, one of them breathed. There's enough gold here to buy half of Arizona. Find those women, Patterson snapped. The gold's worthless without the maps. We pressed deeper into the mountain, following passages that seemed to branch and twist randomly. Without the sisters to guide me, I would have been lost within minutes. How much farther? I asked. Not far, Kachina replied. The passage opens near the old mission ruins about 2 miles from here, to me through underground tunnel filled with Apache graves. I'd had better days. Marshal, Naley said quietly. When we reached the surface, what will you do about Patterson? It was the question I'd been dreading. As a federal officer, I was sworn to uphold the law, even when the law was being manipulated by corrupt local officials. But I'd also seen enough evidence to know that Patterson was guilty of murder, conspiracy, and betrayal of the worst kind. I'll arrest him, I said finally. Let a federal judge sort out the truth, and if he resists arrest, then I'll do what needs to be done. Ayanna stopped walking and turned to face me. In the flickering torchlight, her face was a study in conflicting emotions. Jake, she said using my first name for the first time. You need to understand something about Apache justice. We don't have courtrooms and lawyers and judges. We have balance. When someone takes a life must be given in return. I understand the concept, I said carefully. Do you? Idle asked. Because Patterson didn't just kill our family members. He destroyed our entire village. 37 people died because of his greed. The number hit me like a physical blow. I'd been thinking in terms of individual crimes, but this was genocide, the systematic destruction of an entire community for profit. 37, I repeated. Men, women, children, Sitlai said quietly, including pregnant women, including babies. My resolve to handle this through legal channels began to waver. Some crimes were too large for courtrooms, too evil for lawyers to pass, and judges to sentence. What are you asking me to do? We're asking you to choose, Ayanna said softly. Between the law you swore to uphold and the justice that needs to be done. The tunnel opened ahead of us into a larger chamber, and I could see starlight filtering down through cracks in the ceiling. We were almost to the surface, almost to safety, but the weight of the decision they were asking me to make felt heavier than all the stone above our heads. There has to be another way, I said. There is, Kachina replied. We could disappear, take the maps, and vanish into Mexico, let Patterson keep the gold, and tell whatever story he wants about what happened here, but he'd come after you eventually. Yes, Ayanna agreed. And he'd kill other Apache families while he searched. The cycle would continue until every person who might know about the water sources was dead. We climbed toward the surface through a natural chimney in the rock, emerging into the ruins of an old Spanish mission that had been abandoned decades earlier. The desert stretched around us in all directions, silver and black under the starlight. "So, what's it going to be, Marshal?" Nelly asked as we caught our breath in the shadow of the broken bell tower. Before I could answer, the sound of horses reached us from the direction of Devil's Canyon. Patterson and his men following our trail. They found the other entrance, Sidley observed. "How long do we have?" I asked. 20 minutes, Ayanna estimated. Maybe less. I looked at these 5 extraordinary women who had trusted me with their lives, their secrets, and their hearts. In the space of one night, they had shown me treasures beyond imagination, love beyond reason, and choices beyond the simple categories of legal and illegal. "The maps," I said finally, "what happens to them if Patterson dies?" "They stay with us," Ayanna replied. "They stay with our people where they belong. And if he lives, he steals them, uses them to control water rights throughout the Southwest, and becomes rich enough to buy his own army." Cassina said bluntly. "The Apache nation dies of thirst while he profits from our ancestors' knowledge." The sound of approaching horses grew louder. "Decision time. Jake," Ayanna said, stepping closer to me in the darkness. "There's something I need to tell you before this ends." "What?" "I'm falling in love with you," she said simply. "I know it's crazy. I know we've only known each other for one day, but I needed you to know." My heart stopped. In all my years as a lawman, in all the dangerous situations I'd faced, nothing had ever affected me as powerfully as those 8 words. "Ayanna," I began, but she held up her hand. "You don't have to say anything," she said. "I just wanted you to know that whatever choice you make tonight, it won't change how I feel about you." The horses were close now, close enough that we could hear Patterson shouting orders to his men. "Spread out. They can't have gone far. Find those maps." I made my decision. "Sisters," I said, turning to face all 5 women. "Apache justice it is." Ayanna's smile was radiant. "What do you need us to do?" "What you do best," I replied, checking my weapons one final time. "Hunt." Patterson and his 3 remaining men rode into the mission ruins like they owned the place, which in a sense they did. As sheriff, Patterson had legal authority throughout the territory, and his men were officially deputized. On paper they were the law. But law and justice, I'd learned, were not always the same thing. "I know you're here," Patterson called out, his voice echoing off the broken stone walls. "Come out and maybe I'll make this quick." We had positioned ourselves throughout the ruins. Ayanna and Cassina in the bell tower. Idle and Nelly behind the altar, Sidley near the main entrance, and me in the shadows of what had once been the priest's quarters. Classic Apache hunting formation designed to confuse and disorient prey. "Patterson," I called out, stepping into view with my hands raised, but my gun still holstered. "Let's talk," he spun toward my voice, his revolver already drawn. In the moonlight, I could see that fear and greed had taken their toll on him. His eyes were wild, his movements jerky and unpredictable. "Marshal Morrison," he said, trying to sound official. "I'm placing you under arrest for interfering with a lawful investigation." "What investigation is that?" "Sheriff, the pursuit of Apache murderers," he replied. "Those women killed the Henderson family. I have witnesses." "Witnesses you paid," I said calmly. "Witnesses who will testify to anything for the right price." His face darkened. "That's a serious accusation, Marshal." "Not as serious as genocide," I replied. 37 people, Patterson, including children." For just a moment, his facade cracked, and I saw something that might have been shame in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by cold calculation. "Prove it," he said. "I don't have to prove it," I replied. "They do," Ayanna's voice came from the bell tower, clear and strong in the desert air. "Uncle," she said, and the word dripped with contempt. "You taught us to hunt when we were children. Did you think we'd forgotten the lessons?" Patterson spun toward the sound, but she was already gone, melted back into the shadows like smoke. "You have something that belongs to us. Kachana's voice came from a completely different direction. Something our father died to protect. The maps, Patterson snarled. Where are the maps? Safe. Idle replied from yet another position. Safer than you'll ever be. Patterson's men were getting nervous, their horses dancing and snorting as they tried to watch all directions at once. Apache psychological warfare at its finest. This is your last chance, Patterson shouted. Give me those maps or I'll burn every Apache village in the territory. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the desert wind seemed to hold its breath. Then Nellie's voice came from directly behind Patterson. So close he could have reached out and touched her. You already did that, Uncle, she said softly. You already burned our village. You already killed our families. What more can you threaten us with? Patterson spun around, gun raised, but she was gone. Death, he said, his voice cracking with desperation. I can threaten you with death. Kittely's laugh came from the darkness, musical and terrifying. We died the day you betrayed us, she said. What you see now are spirits come to balance the scales. Whether they intended it or not, the sisters were playing into every superstition and fear that white men had about Apache warriors. Patterson's men were on the verge of panic. Enough! Patterson screamed. I know you're just women. I know you're human and humans can die. He opened fire wildly, shooting at shadows and echoes. His men followed suit, their muzzle flashes lighting up the ruins like lightning. But when the shooting stopped and the echoes faded, 5 Apache women stepped into view from 5 different directions, unharmed and smiling. Our turn, Ayanna said simply. What happened next was over in seconds. 5 shots fired almost simultaneously from 5 different positions. Patterson's 3 men dropped from their horses without ever seeing their killers. Patterson himself remained mounted, his gun empty, his face white with shock and terror. Impossible, he whispered. No, I said, walking toward him with my weapon drawn. Just justice. He looked at me with desperate hope. Marshal, you're a federal officer. You can't let them murder me. I surrender. I claim federal protection. I stopped just out of his reach and holstered my gun. Sheriff Patterson, I said formally, you're under arrest for murder, conspiracy, theft, and violation of federal treaties with the Apache Nation. Relief flooded his face. Thank God. Thank you, Marshal. I'll testify against everyone involved. I'll make a full confession. I'm sure you will, I agreed. But first, you need to face Apache justice. The relief vanished. What? Ayanna stepped up beside me, her rifle trained on Patterson's chest. Apache law is simple, Uncle, she said. You took 37 lives. Apache law demands that you give 37 lives in return. But I only have 1 life to give. True, Kaysen agreed, appearing on his other side. So, you'll have to live that 1 life 37 times in 37 different ways. I saw Patterson's face go through a range of emotions. Confusion, fear, understanding, and finally absolute terror. Marshal, he whispered, you can't let them torture me. That's not justice. That's revenge. I looked at this man who had betrayed his own family for gold, who had committed genocide for profit, who had corrupted everything he'd sworn to protect. You're right, I said finally. That would be revenge. Hope flickered in his eyes. Ayanna, I said, turning to the woman I'd fallen in love with. Make it quick. A shot took Patterson through the heart. He was dead before he hit the ground. In the silence that followed, I felt something I'd never experienced before as a lawman. Complete certainty that justice had been served. Is it over? Chitlala asked quietly. It's over, I confirmed. Ayanna lowered her rifle and looked at me with eyes that held love, gratitude, and just a touch of sadness. What now, Jake? I looked at these 5 remarkable women who had changed my life in the span of a single day and realized that everything I'd thought I wanted, career advancement, respect, a comfortable retirement, meant nothing compared to what I'd found with them. Now, I said, we figure out how to build a life together. All of us. N.A. smiled. Even knowing what we are, what we've done, especially knowing what you are, I replied. You're the bravest, strongest, most honorable people I've ever met. And if you'll have me, I'd like to spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of your trust. Ayana stepped closer. So close that I could feel her warmth in the cool desert air. Are you asking what I think you're asking? I'm asking, I said, taking her hands in mine, if you'd do me the honor of becoming my wife, and if your sisters would do me the honor of becoming my family. The kiss that followed tasted like desert wind and new beginnings. When we finally broke apart, Kasina was grinning. Well, she said, that's one way to keep the maps in the family. As we rode away from the mission ruins toward a new life together, Ayana, leaning back against me on the horse we shared, I reflected on the price of helping 5 Apache women escape from a tree. It had cost me everything I thought I wanted and given me everything I'd never known I needed.